Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Let's Talk, the series where I'm vengeance. This is your friendly neighborhood Birdman, and today we're talking the Batman. So, the Batman is another reboot / retelling of Bruce Wayne and his alter ego, the Batman. This time, Bruce has been the masked vigilante for only the past 2 years, so while he's not necessarily green, he's not the seasoned Batman that you usually see in these films. During a period of political turmoil in Gotham City, a deranged killer known as the Riddler leaves cryptic clues for Batman at the scenes of his crimes, hinting that he might know more about the Caped Crusader than even Batman himself may be prepared for. The first thing I'd like to talk about are the original initials of DC, Detective Comics. More and more, the various Batman films have moved away from that original concept, from George Clooney's Batman not being much of a detective at all to Christian Bale being kinda sorta if you tilt your head sideways. I guess because Batman has become this enormously popular character, he's been put into situations where he's out of his depth as a comic book character, so they have to make him more and more powerful in order to keep up with the Justice League. That is where this film comes in. If you are more of a fan of the prep time, ubiquitous, and omniscient Batman that has infested recent DC lore, you're not going to like this movie. And by that same token, this is exactly what I love most about this movie. Batman is grounded here. He's actually a detective and is literally called one in the movie. If you're like me and appreciate the Batman stories that actually has Batman doing detective work, this is the film for you. Of course, he has a few gadgets to help him along the way, but aside from some really cool contact lenses, most of his material is practical and makes sense for the world he inhabits. And man, what a world. This version of Gotham is straight out of a comic book, and I love it. The entire aesthetic of the film reminds me of mid-80s noir comic books, which are some of the best ever in my opinion. The world is dark and lived in, and you can feel the seedy underbelly of Gotham. The movie's incredible atmosphere is enhanced with a bleak and broody score that permeates the entire film. I wouldn't call it the best Batman score ever, but the music was one of the best parts of the film for me. Robert Pattinson does a pretty good job as Batman. While in the suit, he is fairly intimidating and has a good Batman voice. He perfectly fits as a young and relatively inexperienced Batman. When he fights, he takes some licks and isn't as polished as we're used to seeing Batman be in a fight, which is great in my opinion, but probably has more to do with the choreography, which I'll talk about a little later. However, outside of the suit, I can't say I appreciated Rob's portrayal of Bruce Wayne. Much has been made about Robert's insistence on not bulking up for the role, and I think that was a poor decision. He appears shirtless in the film, and I have to say, he's very unimpressive. He's in shape to be clear, but a guy that's been jumping from rooftops and fighting criminals for 2 years would be in far better shape than Robert was. Moreover, there's an emo vibe that I get from skinny Bruce Wayne that I don't particularly appreciate. Usually there's a spectrum involved with the Batman character where Bruce is a fairly personable playboy and Batman is the edgelord broodster. But here, there is no clear distinction between the two, and if I were a cop close to Batman, I would have figured out Bruce was Batman a long time ago. This Bruce Wayne is clearly a fan of My Chemical Romance and has the running mascara to prove it. The rest of the cast is really good with one minor exception. Zoe Kravitz does a bang-up job as Selina Kyle's Catwoman, although there's some minor reimagining going on with her character that may or may not sit well with her fans. Personally, I didn't care, as Selina's backstory isn't important to me, but this is just a heads up. I loved her relationship with Batman in this movie, as they aren't really enemies and more of a duo. She still is a little more on the dark side than Bruce, which leads to a little tension, but for the most part, the Bat and the Cat get along well, and I enjoyed that. Jeffrey Wright is excellent as Gordon. There's nothing else to be said. Jeffrey is always great in everything he's in, and this is no exception. He gives you exactly what you expect and want from Gordon, and tosses in a little humor too. Colin Farrell is completely unrecognizable as Oswald Cobblepot. This performance was almost Gary Oldman and Johnny Depp levels of chameleon, and that's one of the highest forms of praise for an actor. He literally disappeared into the role, and I can't say enough good things about his performance as the Penguin. I will say that he wasn't in the film as much as I would have liked, but when he was there, he was great. The same goes for Andy Serkis as Alfred. I didn't get enough of him in the film in order to have much of an opinion on him, but when he was there, he was okay. The exception I mentioned earlier is John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. I'm sorry, but I can't take this man serious. Whenever I see him, it comes across as a joke, and in my opinion, he was the only miscast character. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about Paul Dano's performance as the Riddler just yet. I love that he's a serious character and not a caricature. The Riddler is actually a malevolent presence in the film, and you take him seriously when he's there. Riddler is not messing around here, and you understand why he's one of Batman's most notorious villains. However, there's a bit of postmodern terrorist going on with him that felt weird, for lack of a better term. On one hand, he's straight up Zodiac killer, leaving really cool puzzles and fairly easy riddles. I figured out all of them except the last one. Then there's a section in the movie where he comes across as a late millennial, early Gen Z incel, and that was a little off-putting to say the least. You'll see what I mean. As for things I didn't like, the most glaring was the fight choreography. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, this is possibly the lamest Batman choreography in recent years. I'm not sure if it was due to a lack of physicality on Robert's part, but I wasn't impressed at any point of this movie when Batman was fighting. They basically show the best fight scene in the trailer, where Bruce beats the shit out of the guy with face paint, and that was the opening scene. The only good thing I can say about this is that the fight scenes aren't cut to hell. For as happy as I am with the detective portrayal, I'm very much disappointed with the fight scenes in this movie. They're made worse with the weak sound mixing. The fights lack any kind of punch, no pun intended. When someone gets punched or kicked, the impact sound effect blends in with the background noise and musical ambiance. Sound is something people take for granted when watching an action film, but trust me, when it's not there, it's very noticeable. It's not as bad as the sound mixing in Dune, but it's still very disappointing. I also thought the movie was too long. Again, I love long comic book movies. I have legitimately made a career out of talking about them. But this movie was way too long, and you will feel all 3 hours of this thing. I was very much enjoying the atmosphere of this film, but I felt like I was watching 3-hour-long episodes of a TV show. You know how TV shows have a bit of padding to reach that 1 hour mark? That's what this felt like, and there were clear instances of where this film could have been pared down. I will say, however, that I'm happy WB didn't interfere with the artistic vision of the filmmakers and force them to compromise their art, at least from what I could see, but I definitely felt it was too long for the story it was trying to tell. Overall, I had a good time with the Batman. Robert Pattinson nails the costume version of the character, and the noir aesthetic truly does it for me. The music, coupled with the dark and thick atmosphere, makes this a must-watch for film noir fans. The cast mostly does a great job, with the standouts being Colin Farrell and Jeffrey Wright, and the dynamic between Batman and Catwoman is enjoyable to watch. The Riddler will be a point of contention with some fans, as I can see how some will like his portrayal, and I can see how some will dislike it. The fight choreography leaves a lot to be desired, and when you have mostly blah fights in a Batman movie, it will always come across as disappointing. Robert is not a good Bruce Wayne in my opinion, and I still mostly prefer Christian Bale or even Ben Affleck in that respect. But small issues aside, The Batman is a fun time at the movies, and I think this movie is at least worth the price of admission. B-.